Hello. Hi, welcome. I'm Dr. Catherine Lloyd. Everyone calls me Kat. My pronouns are she and her, and I am Director of Postgraduate Programs for the Information Studies area, and I'm also Program Convener for Museum Studies. And I'm joined by some of our wonderful students, often our class representatives, and my fellow Information Studies colleague, David. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm David McMenemy. I'm Programme Convener for Information Management and Preservation Master's degree. Welcome.
Our student representatives, would you like to introduce yourself, Beatty?
Hi, my name's Beatty. I'm from the US. I'm part of the Museum Studies program.
Kathleen?
Hi, my name's Kathleen. I'm from Canada, and I'm part of the Information Management and Preservation program, or IMP.
IMP, that's our first acronym of the day. And finally, Chrissy.
Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm from East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow, and I'm part of the Information Management and Preservation programme.
Thank you very much. And we have a very international and local student community, and it's really lovely to have that wonderful mix. And thank you so much to our student representatives for joining us here. We've worked them very hard this year as class representatives, and they've done a really brilliant job representing the needs of our current students and thinking about what you, our incoming students, might need and want from the program. So we're very grateful that they've taken even more time to join us today. So thank you very much. So we are Information Studies, and we have specialisms in cultural heritage and records management, information management, and we've got a fantastic team of researchers and teachers and practice-based sector representatives who work with us on the program. You'll have seen we have two programs. We have our Masters in Museum Studies and our Masters in Information Management and Preservation, which we do shorten to IMP. And if you'll forgive me, we'll probably refer to it as IMP quite a lot today because it's quite the mouthful. We're a really unique department because we teach across what we call the GLAM sector. And I feel I need to see my jazz hands for this. So GLAM is galleries, libraries, archives and museums, and record management. And we haven't quite worked out our wonderful acronym to include record management within it, GLAMR, something like that. Sounds like a dodgy app. So we have really benefit from having this kind of wonderful, vibrant community where we can learn from one another, and we do some co-teaching across the programs, which is why we thought it'd be helpful to speak to all of our incoming students in information studies together. There will be things today that are more specific to one program or the other, and we'll turn you to our wonderful class reps, and David and I will do our best to kind of answer those specific questions about the program. But we really do try to kind of work with you all as a cohort and learn from one another and benefit from that kind of peer expertise. You'll have seen in our wonderful introduction video some of the wonderful work that goes on in the College of Arts. They have videos there showing Malcolm Chapman, who's our collections manager, pulling some of our wonderful paintings out in the Hunterian. You'll have seen insights into our archives and special collections and all of the wonderful facilities we have on campus, including some really world-class museums, which as the Museum Studies convener, have to get in there. David can give you the hard sell on archives and special collections. And as incoming students, you'll be introduced to all of these facilities in our orientation week. So if you're already thinking about start dates and things like that, we start on the 12th of September. I'm just quickly bringing up my diary there. It's the Monday before actual term starts. We'll be giving you an introduction to all of our facilities on campus. So I would like to kind of speak a little bit more about our kind of research expertise and things like that. David, do you want to kind of kick us off with a little bit about your background?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Well, my background in practice was in public library, so I worked in the Mitchell Library, which is Glasgow's main reference library, from 1987 to 2001, so older than I look, hopefully. And I became an academic in 2001. I ran the Masters in Librarianship at Strathclyde University for 20 years, and then joined Glasgow in 2022. So yeah, relatively new comer to Glasgow University and their programme. But my background increasingly moved from libraries to more general information ethics type issues and law. So I can convene the module related to law in the IMP programme, and I also teach in the first semester as well. So yeah, broad interests. Increasingly, as my interests moved more towards digital ethics, information ethics generally. I've done a lot of work with CILIP, the professional body for one of the accreditors for the degree. So I was on the board of CILIP. I was a trustee of CILIP for several years, and I'm currently a trustee and board member of the Scottish Library and Information Council, which is the government advisory body for libraries and information in Scotland. So yeah, broad range of interests. I have written a lot on public libraries as well. That was obviously my main motivation originally, but I'm very interested in information management generally across the board in terms of the ethical issues, the legal issues that apply. So things like privacy, copyright, data protection, computer misuse, all of those different types of areas that apply in modern practice.
Thanks. And so I am a specialist in museum studies, and my background is working in museum learning and engagement, and I run our course in learning engagement, which Bidi has taken, and I'm sure she can tell you about it in a minute. And I also run our course Introduction to Museology, which is where we think about museological theory and some of the key kind of themes that are emerging of that. So things like memory, identity, how we work with communities, museums and activism, museums and empire. And we have a very strong anti-racism pedagogy within that course and the program as a whole as well. And it's important to emphasize that. And I've previously worked in museums in Scotland and in Canada. And I've also been involved in various kind of projects, kind of co-producing work with communities and thinking about community heritage. And I came to information studies because I was involved in a project looking at online collections and how communities can use online collections. So it's quite different from my background, and I started becoming very interested in the digital elements of museums and how we can use digital technology to better serve communities. So that's kind of how I ended up in this information studies department. It's a really unique place to study museum studies because of that, because we are always learning from our colleagues in information management and preservation, thinking about how we work with data, how we work with metadata, how silences in our collections can appear because we use poor data management. So we're really learning from one another. It's a really fabulous place to be in terms of that. I want to hand over to our students now at this point and kind of ask you to talk a little bit about the sorts of courses that you've taken this year and things that you found interesting and exciting about those and how those have related to your interests. I'm going to stick with the same order if that's okay, everyone.
So I took the courses that are required for the first semester, which are Intro to Museology, Managing Using Collections, and then Museum Skills and Professional Practice. And then the second semester, where you get to choose your own courses, I chose Digital Cultural Heritage and Museum Learning and Engagement, and I did a work placement. Those are all great. Enjoyed all of them specifically. I'm not saying this just because Kat's here. Really love museum learning and engagement.
I'll pay you later. It's okay.
Okay, so then for me in the Information Management and Preservation program, we have required courses that we take in the first semester as well. And those are, see if I can remember, Records and Evidence, which is a really great course. We learn about some theory stuff, and we also get to actually handle some of the archival documents and records that are held at the university. Then we also took Archives, Records, and Information Management, which is like our foundational course that covers all of those different fields that are in our program. And then we also have Description, Cataloging, and Navigation, which are more about things like, metadata, different metadata standards that they use in archives and in different countries internationally. And then in second semester, we have a variety of, elective courses that we can take. So I ended up taking Law and Information Governance, which was a really great course. And we also have a required one that we take, which is Digital Curation and Preservation. And there's another course that I took that was kind of after our second semester. It was like a short course called paleography, which is kind of like learning how to read really old handwriting, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed all my courses. I thought they were all really great, and they covered a really good variety of, the different fields that you can get into in the IMP sector, because it's not just about archives, it's also about things like records management, privacy, freedom of information, all of that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Kathleen.
So I think me and Kathleen kind of did the same courses. I think we picked the same ones as well, but I think like the courses you do in the first semester really help in getting you up to speed on like archival theory and things, because I didn't have a lot of background in archives and stuff before I did the course, so they were really good in even just kind of getting your confidence up and getting to grips with the course. And in the second semester I did 2D digitisation as well, which was really good, but like the cameras and taking pictures of the documents and how you digitise them, and it was really good to get some hands-on experience. And I'm the same, I really enjoyed all my courses. It's been a great year.
It's always nice to hear at the end of the year, because we put a lot of love into these courses. We put a lot of energy into these courses, so it's nice to hear that people have had a good time. I've noticed there's a question been raised in the chat which relates to a little bit of what some of you were talking about there, about the hands-on work that you do. Now, I'm going to come in with my museum managing and using collection hat here and say that the first rule of working in a museum or an archive is you don't touch things, you don't use your hands unless you have to. So that's your first lesson, not even started yet. So what do we mean by hands-on when we talk about working in archives, working in museums? So the framing that I actually prefer is kind of practice-based approaches. So yes, at some point in your degrees, you will be in archives, in museums, you will be handling objects, you will be having specific sessions with museum professionals on how to handle objects. You'll be working with our staff in archives and special collections and thinking about, how we very carefully can turn the pages on a manuscript, how we can use cushions to look after our books. My colleague Joanna Green will give you top tips on what nail varnish you can and cannot wear when working with manuscripts. We'll get down to the granular detail on what's important. But when we talk about hands-on, we're often talking about this bigger picture in terms of the professional skills that we know that you need to enter the sector. And we do this in lots of different ways. And we do this in conjunction with our professionals as well. So we have people who've worked in the sector are embedded in our teaching staff. So David's talked about his background. Dr. Paul Gooding is a librarian by trade. Adele Redhead is an archivist. We have a curator, Sarah Cook, and Maria Economou, both active curators on staff. My colleague Nikki Reeves in the Hunterian teaches a course on curated sciences. And we also have the wonderful Hunterian colleagues who work in collections management. So Lizzie O'Neill and Malcolm Chapman as well. I'm just going to list all the wonderful people at this point. So we've got Bob McLean in special collections, and all of these people will sit and talk to you about what they need to do on a daily basis in their job, and how what we are doing in the classes are things that you actually need to engage with and think about when you go into the sector. So coming back to that question of hands-on, we try to make sure that whenever you are on campus, you are doing something active. Okay, so you're not necessarily just sitting and listening, but sitting and listening is an important tool of learning. But we are spending time working in archives and special collections, looking at objects. We are spending time in the Hunterian collection stores, taking things out, looking at them. We go into museums and galleries and spend time looking at the displays and talking about them critically with one another and thinking about how we could do things differently, perhaps, or what we like about practice. So hands-on for us means something slightly different, I think, than perhaps students often talk about. They sometimes are only talking about how do I move an object from here to there? We're thinking about these kind of broader professional skills. And it also includes things like working with databases. And this is something that we do across both of our programs. We'll provide training on how to work with, for example, EMU, which is the Hunterian's collections management system, which is now being used across archives and special collections and the museum sector. Within the IMP program, there is a cataloguing placement. Do you want to speak specifically about that, David? Actually, it would be a good time to do that.
Yeah, it's the cataloguing placement itself is virtual. It has been for the past couple of years, and it's likely to be next year as well. One of the issues around COVID was the physical access to buildings. So it's actually gone pretty well so far. Perhaps Kathleen and Chris can talk later about the specific projects they worked on, but our colleagues in special collections and the archives in Glasgow University basically put together projects every year for the students to do on the virtual placement. As Kat said, you will also get access to documents as well physically, because as part of the Records and Evidence course, there are weekly sessions run within archives themselves, and basically you get to kind of do some hands-on work with physical book materials and consider them as actual pieces of evidence. So there's a mix basically, which I think reflects the nature of the workplace nowadays. In terms of the virtual post-COVID, the virtual's a big part of what we do professionally. So yeah, hopefully that would be enjoyable for you in terms of the ability to work on projects that are specified by special collections, but also get your hands on physical materials within the archive itself. The archive service at Glasgow University has spent quite a bit of money on new teaching facilities, so we have the ability to basically zoom in on materials and present that live as well for students who can't make it into the physical rooms. So really a cutting edge in terms of the ability to work with that material and also learn virtually if you can't make it along that day.
And David, you were mentioning about the cataloguing placements. We offer placements across both of our programs. Would you mind our student representatives talking a little bit about the placements that you undertook?
Sure. You want me to go ahead? Okay. So I did a work placement with the National Trust for Scotland. I worked at a currently not open house that they've just recently acquired. So I was tasked with, alongside another student, cleaning everything in the house, cleaning the house because it hadn't been used or lived in for a few years. And then in the process of that, sort of identifying objects of interest within the house that the curator might be interested in talking more about when they're writing interpretation. And then once we finished cleaning everything in the house, because it was a big house and there was lots to clean, we also assisted the curator with some research. So that included going through the paper archives that were in the house. There's a lot of old family documents, financial records, just sort of to give us an idea of what the family was like that lived there and what kind of stories could be told from the house, about the family, about the house, about Glasgow in that time period that the house is from. And yeah, so it was quite varied. It's very much started off as heavily collections care and management, sort of learning about pest control, identifying pests, things of that nature, and then how to clean different things. But then it later on morphed into something a little bit more around collections, interpretation and sort of thinking through the eyes of a curator and what the curator was looking for within the house itself. So that's what I did.
Thanks, Beatty.
So what we did in our course, like David said, it was virtual placement. We started it earlier on in the first semester. It's something called data cleaning, which doesn't sound very exciting, but I actually really enjoyed it. Basically, the Archives and Special Collections at the university, like Kat was saying, is moving everything over into EMU. So pretty much the assignments that we were given revolved around sort of reformatting some of the information or the metadata that we had for certain records. So I was working with records that belong to a crane manufacturing company that was based out of Glasgow in the early 1900s. And so basically, we were just given a spreadsheet, and we were given like several weeks to work on it. So you could work on it at your own pace. It only took about 10 hours total. And I just reformatted the metadata that I was given into a different spreadsheet to send back to the archives so they could put it into EMU for user access. It's not the most glamorous type of work, but it is the type of work that you often will end up doing when you work in archives. And it was a really good experience doing some actual practical work with metadata, for sure.
And Chrissy?
Yeah, I think I did the exact same one again as you, Kathleen. I did the cranes one, and as you said, it was just really good in getting to like undertake a task that's quite common in archiving, and it really helped me like build my knowledge of how you catalogue and the descriptions and finding aids and how the kind of hierarchies work within the catalogues. And as well, it was about your time management skills because you did get it early on in the semester. So yeah, I just thought it was really good. It's a really good practical experience, and I really enjoyed it as well.
And it's really interesting hearing kind of what you've got out of that. The fact that time management is something that's coming out of that really strongly is quite nice. So yeah, so when we talk about hands-on, you know, the different ways in which we can interpret this, and it might not be, I know when you're signing up for a program, it might not be kind of what you've got in your head, like, yes, I'm going to come to Glasgow and learn time management. But, you know, it's these kinds of more intrinsic benefits that we have through this sort of work that you can really see. We also, I mean, we heard about how Kathleen was working on EMU, a real catalogue that archives and special collections use. We utilise the expertise of our students a lot here at Glasgow, I think would be a nice way to phrase that. So BD, as part of the course that I ran on museum learning and engagement, was one of the groups who put on a family day at Calvin Hall. And Calvin Hall is this amazing, wonderful, weird facility where we did a lot of our teaching at Glasgow, and it holds the National Library of Scotland's Moving and Image and Sound Archive, headed by a former IMP graduate, I should say. It houses collections from Glasgow museums. So there's a kind of a big open store, which as you walk along the corridor, you can see into the stores, which is really cool. It also has the Huntarians stores. It has a gym. It has a soft play. It's a very strange and wonderful building, and it really speaks to the role that culture and heritage play in Glasgow, and the fact that it's so kind of central to communities. And thank you to my colleagues for putting a link in the chat there. I really do recommend checking that out. So as part of the course that I teach, I asked the students to come up with a series of events to run as a family day aimed at kind of encouraging families to come into Calvin Hall, to engage with our collections, to experience something new. We often find that a lot of them use the soft play, but they don't actually think about using the cultural offer, the museums and the heritage collections. So we have been working with our students to kind of stage these interventions to encourage people to explore the building in new ways and put on different sorts of events. And BD did a fantastic project. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So since there's so many students in the class, you get split into a few different groups that work with different partners within Calvin Hall. One of the partners at Calvin Hall is the National Library of Scotland. They have their moving image archive there. So my group ended up working with them, and we had to base our event and what we were doing around the theme of broadcasting, because this is like the 100th anniversary of like the first broadcasts from Scotland. So we came up with ideas of events and activities to do around that sort of tied in with the National Library of Scotland. So my group ended up doing 2 activities, one of which was a craft that we basically had people make, like kids and families make their own little radio. And it sort of gave like a talking point to sort of talking about radios with children and the broadcasting on radios, because that's not something that small children may come in contact with as much anymore. So that was a really, really good and fun time. And there was a lot of a lot of fun families came through there. And then the second activity that we did was a edited video of a bunch of different clips from the NLS's archive itself to kind of highlight some of the things that are in the archive that might have been interesting to families. We made sure to use things that were like from Scotland specifically, or were in Scots or Gaelic, to sort of kind of highlight some things that were Scotland specific as well from the archive. And because that was part of the NLS's ask, was that we try and do something to highlight the archive, to encourage people to come to NLS, use the moving image archive, and make people aware that they're there and that they want people to come visit and use their resources. But yes, that's what my group did. There were 3 other groups that worked with different partners and did other activities tied in with broadcasting, but that's what my group did specifically.
Thanks, Bidi. And NLS offer a lot of the cataloguing type placements on the IMP program as well, and also contribute quite a lot as teaching staff as well at different points in the year, depending on what sort of projects they're working on. Dr. Paul Gooding has done lots of collaborative work with NLS, looking at issues of open access, but that's not it. It's legal deposit. There we go. I'm having to put my library hat on, not my museum hat. Correct me if I'm wrong, David. Looking at legal deposit at NLS and public access to that, and is currently doing some really interesting work around AI and thinking about how AI can be used to think about collection discoverability, etc., which is really exciting. And it's one of the fab things about being in an information studies department. You hear about all these slightly different projects that are just slightly kind of, I think I would speak for David as well, like pushing us out of our comfort zones as well in terms of our expertise, and thinking about how the sector is changing and how we maybe need to change with it. So it's really, really fab. I'm going to come back to some of the questions that are in the chat. So we've got a question around applied dissertations. So our dissertation is a 60 credit option. It's not option, sorry, it's a essential part of the 1-year program for those who are registered on the full MSc, which I think all of our representatives are full year MSc students. We do also offer a PGDip, postgraduate diploma, and that is a 120 credit option, which is basically you do 3 taught courses in semester 1 and 3 taught courses in semester 2. And then that's finalized. The DIP is on both programs is accredited by CILIP. Only the full master's program, I believe, is accredited on ARA. Is that correct, David?
That's my understanding, Kat. Yeah.
And we also, for those who are just after a taster, we also offer PG Cert, postgraduate certificate options on both programs as well, where you can take 3 courses. On the Museum Studies program, those courses are Museum Skills and Professional Practice, Managing and Using Collections, and then one of our practice-based semester 2 courses, so a work placement, museum learning engagement, my course, or our exhibition development course. So that's the postgraduate certificate in museum studies, and it's very focused on kind of the very practice-based courses as opposed to the more theory-based courses. And I think in information management preservation, students can take any course to make up the certificate. Is that right, David?
Yeah, there's no stipulation in terms of the PG cert. In terms of how that works, certainly from an information management perspective, the PGDip might be problematic abroad in terms of being recognised, so you have to be a little bit careful there. In the UK, it's normally fine for getting a professional job, but just be careful. Obviously, ask our advice if that's you want to leave with that. Most students do the master's degree because it obviously gives them more options in the future.
And so this is the period of the year where our students are working very, very hard on our dissertations. And have they all got smiles on their faces? Yes, just about. It's going well. So it's a 60 credit option, and we offer a dissertation, or what we call an applied dissertation. And I'll come to that in a minute. So dissertations in information studies are really an opportunity to bring together theory and practice, and they're designed to consolidate your learning across the year. We teach a very international cohort, and each year there are students who have done a dissertation before, perhaps at Glasgow even, and really understand the requirements of that. And we have some international students who've perhaps never written anything that's longer than 5,000 words, and it's a kind of source of anxiety. We are familiar with working with both types of students. We have a dissertation course in place that runs throughout the year as an online course to kind of guide you through through the research process and thinking about how to formulate a question. And our colleagues in the College of Arts run a course over the summer which provides additional skills and things like how to write a literature review, how to write a methodology chapter, how to analyse data and things like that. So there's lots of support there if you're hearing the word dissertation and getting a little bit worried. As I said, all of our dissertations are focused on marrying theory and practice, and we kind of ask in those initial questions, you know, why should practitioners care about what it is that you're doing? Like, why is this relevant? Why do we need this? And that should be in the introduction and in the conclusion of your dissertation. So what? So what for the sector? And that's a reminder to all of our students that that's what you should be working on at this point now. You tend to get bogged down in the, you know, what am I actually researching in the moment? And then you just take a step back and think, you know, why should practitioners care about what it is that I'm looking at right now? I'll hand over to our students now to actually talk about the topics that they're working on, and then I'll come back to explaining how the applied dissertation is a little bit different. So I'm going to go with the same order again.
All right, so I am writing my dissertation based around the museum in Glasgow called St. Mungo's Museum of Religious Life and Art. I am doing a visitor survey, basically. It's not a traditional visitor survey where I am working directly with the museum for a variety of reasons, but I am recruiting people to go to the museum, fill out the survey. I'm investigating whether people feel like the museum is reaching its stated goal of creating understanding between people of all faiths and none. And then also, additionally, trying to research whether people feel like their religion is represented well there. And so within this, I'm also reading and writing about a lot of literature that's about the museum itself. It's been written about a lot in the past, as well as kind of reviewing how museums go about displaying religious objects within the museum, and how different museums handle religion as a subject, since it's so personal. So that's what I'm doing.
And a really interesting topic and a great place to be doing it. St. Mungo's was very much at the forefront of this type of work when it opened in Glasgow. So I'm really looking forward to reading that one, Billy. Kathleen?
So my dissertation is about concepts surrounding trauma in archival practice. It's something that just kind of came to me toward the end of the first semester of our course. So don't think that you need to know going in what you're going to write about. But one of my professors mentioned something one day about how sometimes you interact with users in the archive who may, have a history with trauma, or, come across records that are, seen as traumatic, and they could have a strong emotional reaction to it. And it's also something that archivists themselves should have an awareness of when working with records. In Canada, for example, lots of archives have records relating to things like Indigenous residential school programs that used to operate in Canada. So I'm specifically looking at why should that be incorporated into archival practice, and also how should archivists be taught about it, whether it be in graduate programs like ours, or in continuing professional development courses, or maybe both. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
That is a really fabulous topic, which I am hearing about for the first time, and really, really resonates. I was speaking to some colleagues at National Library of Scotland who are working with collections. I think they're oral histories of people who survived or went through the AIDS crisis and lost many people. And the people who are kind of working through that collection right now, that it is a traumatic experience to be working through that collection, and what they can do as an organisation to care and support their cataloguers, because you can't get through as many of those files as you wanted to, if that's the sort of topic that you're dealing with. So relevant to practice, which is exactly what we're looking for from our graduates, and so many overlaps with the Museum Studies program as well, in terms of some of the truth and reconciliation themes as well. Brilliant. Chrissy?
Yeah, so I'm looking at archives in Scottish football for my dissertation. The idea came to me through one of the courses, description, catalogue and navigation, when we had to conduct a catalogue search, and we could like search for anything. So I searched for my football team and nothing came up, and I searched for other Scottish teams as well and not much came up either. So I'm kind of looking at like the current nature of that Scottish football archives and football archives in the wider United Kingdom, why there's not a lot of representation. And I'm going to focus on what factors are preventing their development and exploring ways forward to democratise access to these types of archives. So I'm doing a lot of reading around community archives, digitisation and cultural and social justice. So yeah, that's mine.
And again, like another really, really useful and relevant topic that draws together so many different themes throughout your studies, but then very, very specific to you and things that you're passionate about, and thinking about users. I think that's something that's in common with all our programs. Yes, like we want to look after the stuff, we're interested in the stuff, we want our objects and things, but it's how can we ultimately help our users to get what they need out of these collections, I think is one of our kind of overarching themes. So really, really interesting, really, really useful. Thank you, all of you. And also well done for being able to give nice, succinct, this is my dissertation at this point. Like we're June, we're looking at mid-July for our submission of our dissertation. So it's really, really lovely to hear that, and quite nerve-wracking, I'm sure, to kind of convey that. So fabulous, fabulous topics. So how is this a little bit different from our applied dissertations? So applied dissertations is something that's offered specifically on the museum studies program, but as you'll have seen, the IMP dissertations also have a very, very strong element of practice as well. So applied dissertations, we offer a small number of them each year. And essentially we have some really, really fabulous relationships with some of our sector partners who usually will come forward with some topics that they're interested in and say, actually, we've got this project. It's not quite big enough for a PhD. It's not something that we can maybe do in-house, but there's a research question here. Are any of your students interested in this? In the past, we've had some really fabulous ones in partnership with Museums Galleries Scotland. For example, we had a student who worked on the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museums project. So they undertook a really big survey of the whole of the museum studies, museum sector, well, cultural heritage sector actually in Scotland, asking what they were thinking about in relation to working on issues of empire and slavery and how far along that journey they were as organisations. So the student did a really, really fabulous job of this survey and created this really, really rich data set, which Museums Galleries Scotland are now using to inform their future practice. So I had the privilege of supervising that one, absolutely brilliant student, and so useful for us as staff actually, because we can sit in those meetings as well and kind of hear what the practitioners are interested in and what value they hear from research. So we offer a small number of those each year. They are dependent on whether or not anyone gets in touch with us with projects. We obviously go out every year and say, these are our graduates. So our soon-to-be graduates, they're brilliant. What are you working on right now? Is there anything that someone could meaningfully do? So it does fluctuate from year to year. So we have, over the past few years, we've had quite a few. This year we didn't have any, and I think it's really important to be transparent about that. No one had a perfect project for us, but we are reaching out to organisations this summer and saying, you know, like, we're kind of moving away from the pandemic. Are there any other projects that you'd like to kind of get off the ground now? So I just want to be transparent that that opportunity wasn't necessarily there this year. The other model for an applied dissertation is essentially students can develop their own applied dissertation. And the way that this happens is that students who are working perhaps on their work placement in semester 2, perhaps they're getting into something with their work placement host and thinking, do you know what, this would actually make a really, really good dissertation topic, and they want to do it with the organizations. They're kind of working internally and doing it together as opposed to kind of coming in as an external researcher. And that is a model that we've used quite successfully in previous years, where people have developed these with either their work placement hosts or perhaps somewhere where they are undertaking a voluntary placement or even working as well. So that's the only difference really with an applied dissertation. It's still the same word count. It's still trying to marry theory and practice. You can't just do a practice-based piece, but there are kind of more opportunities to think about different kinds of outputs within that. So creating something, we've had people creating exhibitions, creating learning programs and things like that, but talking about the kind of the theory behind what they're doing and how they went about developing it. So we've had some really, really fab projects there, including one of our wonderful current PhD students, Amy Fletcher, who did an applied dissertation looking at how the Hunterian could work with autistic visitors, how they could kind of better provide for that demographic. And she's now taken that forward as a PhD. But the legacies of that applied dissertation are that the Hunterian now have these sensory backpacks. I don't know if you've seen these going around museums. So they have things like headphones, squishy toys, sensory aids, basically, to kind of help people feel calm when they're visiting. So that was a real intervention that one of our students developed through her dissertation. So our students are doing fabulous, wonderful, powerful work in the sector, and we're so proud of them. I sound like a proud mother. I'm going to come to some of the other questions in the chat. I'm going to go to the technology question first. Is there any kind of technology requirements for the museum studies program? I need to get a new laptop. I don't know if that's something that I should do. Despite working in an information studies department, I am not the tech queen, but I do a good job of it. So I think the first thing to say is that the university provides really good IT services for our students on campus. You can always access a university computer, and we use Office 365, which means that you can access all of the Microsoft platforms that we use in the cloud. So there's no need to have any of that on a personal laptop, like downloaded programs. You can do everything through the clouds. You can do everything online. We use a lot of different sorts of platforms in our teaching. All of the platforms that we use are accessible via university licenses. So we'll never give you anything that's an essential part of your teaching where you have to go and purchase any software and things like that. Within museum studies, we use Teams quite a lot. I don't know how many of you have maybe encountered Microsoft Teams before. So we do a lot of collaborative work between students, and we use Teams and SharePoint and our cloud-based servers to kind of do that kind of work. I have had some people say that Teams doesn't run particularly well on older machines. So that might be something that you want to think about. David, do you have any top tips there?
No, I think it summed up quite well. The Office 365 thing is excellent. All students get access to that once they register. So you can basically download that on any of your devices, be they Android, Windows, or Mac. As Kat said, other software you might need things like survey software or qualitative analysis software. You might need licenses are provided for that. So we use a system called Qualtrics for our survey software, and you will automatically have a license to that for your dissertation if you're doing any survey work. NVivo is the qualitative analysis software a lot of students use for their analysis of their dissertation work as well. And again, that's expensive software to buy, but you'll have a license for that. So yeah, I think a good laptop that was able to handle Office functions and some digitization work would be a good buy, whether that's if you're a Mac person or a Windows person. I don't know if the students have had any issues with IT this year in terms of their own personal IT, but do any of you have Chromebooks or anything? I haven't used one, but I'm not sure if that would be powerful enough. Perhaps a good Windows PC or Mac might be best. I don't know if any of the students could offer anything on that.
I use a Mac. I use a Mac. It's an older model, and it's working fine because, like you said, everything's mostly online through Microsoft 365. So. Yeah, but I haven't had any major tech issues at all. No, fingers crossed. Knock on wood.
Yeah, same here. I also use a Mac. I haven't had any issues. So
yeah, I'm the same.
Good.
I also use the Mac, but Microsoft is just as good.
Windows. I'm the only Windows man in the room.
But I think that's important. You know, we're an information studies department. We think a lot about how things can be used in different platforms. We think a lot about being able to use things on an open access basis. This applies not just to like the tech that we use, but the ways that we teach as well. We really try and kind of be very inclusive in providing different ways to engage with you and meet you where you are as a learner. We provide free access via your library membership as a member of the university to all of the core readings and recommended readings as well. And you can access those via the reading lists at Glasgow system. I know I had a question prior to the event about, you know, how to find readings and things like that. So if you go onto our program landing pages, it'll take you through to the different courses, and each of those courses has a link to our reading lists at Glasgow system. Now, the reading lists that are up there currently are this year's, and I can say that as a staff member, I do not touch my reading list until I come back from annual leave at the end of July, but they are a good indication of the sorts of resources that we'll be using on the program. We do try and keep things fresh. We do kind of bring in kind of new readings, so there is no need to go and do lots and lots of reading before coming onto the program. But if you want to kind of familiarize yourself with what sorts of things we might look at, you're more than welcome to go and have a look at the readings on the reading lists at Glasgow system. It's also quite a good way to choose which optional courses you might be interested in. So really have a look at what's on there, because that'll give you a good sense of kind of if the course matches with what your idea of what it might be is. So yes, we will update those kind of later in the summer. There is no need to do any reading. I'm going to say that now. There is no need to purchase anything. Everything you need will be provided for you from September. But if you just kind of want to get your head in the space, and I think the students will probably attest, it's quite an intense year. We throw quite a lot at you. So if you want to kind of ease yourself in and kind of familiarize yourself, then please do. But do not go out and buy anything. Don't pay for access to anything. We can provide that. I'm getting lots of really specific questions now, so I'm going to try and get through these in time, which I can answer. So curating library practices is a course that is an optional course. It doesn't run every year. It's led by Professor Sarah Cook, who is a curator. She has had major shows in all kinds of different sorts of institutions. The really big one that she worked on recently was called 24/7, and that was at Somerset House. Really, really big show that got lots of international press. And she's really interested in how we curate things that aren't fixed, which is a really interesting question in a kind of information studies context. So how you create digital artworks that change constantly, how you create works that decay, how you create intangible cultural heritage, which is something that we're very interested in here in Scotland, you know, something that's designed to live, to breathe, to change. So I can't actually confirm whether or not that course is running in semester 2, as Sarah's just taken over as head of subject, but I can say that the lessons from that course will be embedded into teaching across our programs, and Sarah is always happy to talk with people about what that course involves, and there's opportunities for supervision in relation to that. Similarly, curating the sciences. So curating the sciences is confirmed for next year. Curating the sciences is run by my colleague, Dr. Nikki Reeves, who's curator of science and medical collections at the Handson. He's a fab teacher. He's got a huge interest in disability history and the use of medical collections in relation to telling stories of disabilities. It's something that's very close to his heart. And most weeks he will either be in the Handson with you, taking out objects and thinking about, you know, the issues that arise from them, or visiting different sorts of sites and thinking about how they display different sorts of stories. Bidi, did you do curating the sciences? I can't remember.
I didn't.
Okay. It's a fab course, and it's one that every year people just absolutely love. David, I'm going to hand over specific questions around IMP, around choosing between the DIP and the masters.
Oh, Jude's question. Yeah. The way that tends to work is the MSc is more recognised abroad. So the PG diploma tends to be a very British thing. So if you're looking for jobs in the UK, shouldn't really be an issue. It's more, it's not really an understood qualification abroad. So if you're coming from perhaps North America, the more common entry route to professional jobs there is the Masters. So yeah, maybe drop me a note with your background and I can advise you better on that. But if you're from the UK, it's quite common for students to leave with the PGDip. In fact, quite a lot of students register for Masters and then perhaps leave with the PGDip over the summer because they get a job. So I wouldn't be concerned about it in the UK, but certainly if you're from abroad, the Masters would be a better option. But yeah, drop me a note. I'm on holiday until Monday, but drop me a note and I can answer in more detail for you.
I would also echo that as well. A lot of our UK students take the PGDip, and to be really honest and transparent, it's a very affordable option in relation to the full Masters, and it's something that I know is of concern to a lot of students. We're in a cost of living crisis, and the PGDip is something that I certainly recommend to students if they're not sure about the full year but still want the kind of benefits of a taught program. And certainly amongst my cohort back in the day when I did my museum studies qualification, lots of people took the PGDip and they're all in pretty impressive jobs right now. So it hasn't changed their kind of career path in that respect. Although I would still big up the value of the dissertation, having heard the wonderful topics that people have described. We've got a question around backgrounds and having been a history undergraduate student. Now, I'm not sure which program you were interested in applying to, Hannah, but I think this is something that's relevant to both programs. The most common background for our students is history, I would say. And yet we have a huge variety of students who come to us with all kinds of different backgrounds. Myself, my background is in literature and ethnology, so kind of folklore and things like that. Paul Gooding, also a literature graduate. We get people from film, media and TV. We get archaeologists, we get geographers, we get scientists sometimes, which are very exciting. People come from many, many, many different backgrounds to our subject area, and we endeavour to meet you where you are as learners. We try to scaffold the way that we approach things to kind of make you more familiar with the sorts of assessments that we're using. We do have traditional essays, and we obviously have the dissertation, which is a long written piece, but the kinds of ways that we interrogate topics are different. So, for example, one of the bits of feedback I often give to students at this point in the dissertation is, you're writing a history dissertation. Don't give me the history of the object. Tell me what I need to know about it as a museum professional or as an archivist. How do we preserve this object? How might we interpret this object? What are the issues surrounding it from a professional point of view? And we teach you that. If you already knew how to do all of these things, there'd be no point coming to the program. So we do different sorts of assessments, and that's something that's really important to us. It's about giving you those skills you can then go out and talk about in job interviews. As we've heard from our students, they've got very real things that they can go and talk about in job interviews, which are different from, I wrote a really brilliant essay where I can really show deep historical understanding. So it's not that those skills aren't really important. Bring them with you, but we're going to help you do something else with those. We have got one other question, which I think is about Kaylee's question about how you apply for something. And I think that might be a question relating to work placements or cataloguing placements. I'm not quite sure. What we do with our placements and also our exhibition course as well is we advertise what opportunities there are to students, and students rate their preferences basically. And we try and match people as best we can, and people usually get one of their top 3 options, and that's something that's managed by specific staff on those courses, on our work placement course. And is it documents? Which is the course that the cataloguing placement sits in, David? Sorry.
Oh yeah, it's the documentation, cataloguing and navigation, I think. Is that the one? Yeah.
ECN, yes. I can give you the acronym, but not the title. It's the end of the day, I'm tired. So that's how we manage that process, Kaylee. I hope that answers your question. And then a general question about preparation, I would recommend, if you're on social media, try and follow as many professional bodies as you can. So follow CILIP, follow the Museum Association, follow ICOM, follow ARA, follow Museums Gallery Scotland. Try and get a sense of where the debates are in the sector before you come. You're going to love this Museum Studies ones. Visit as many museums as you can. That's your homework throughout the entire year. We constantly are out doing field work and field trips and things like that, but we encourage you to go out and see things. Look at what practitioners are talking about and think about how you can start thinking as a practitioner would be my top tip. We've only probably got about another minute, but have any of our students got a more practical top tip to offer to our incoming students?
I'll just say, just the best way so I came from a background where I was out in the workforce for about 8 years before coming back. So it was kind of a weird situation compared to some people, but just come prepared to just have an amazing year and just be excited about what you're doing, because it is a really great opportunity. I've been incredibly thankful for it, that I was able to do this. And so just come prepared to have your mind, like, just completely think about museums differently 9 months after September, because now I see things differently than I did 9 months ago. So just come with an open mind and ready to think about things in a different way that you haven't before. So just be ready for that.
And I'm not to cut anyone else off who wants to join in. There's another specific question come in, which is quite helpful, I think. What will the split be like between online and in-person classes? How many days a week will there be classes? So this is slightly different from course to course and program to program, but you will take, a full-time student will take 3 courses a semester, and that generally works out as you're on campus on those 3 days. The number of contact hours involved in that does vary depending on the course. To give you an example, on my Introduction to Museology course, I have all of my pre-recorded lectures and pre-recorded things that I'd like you to engage with. So maybe a podcast a curator has done, or an online exhibition I'd like you to look at. But then we meet together and we physically go and visit a museum, and we think about the lecture material and the readings in relation to that museum. So that's kind of how, like, the split between online and in-person kind of works on that course. We have a similar situation on our Managing and Using Collections courses. So you watch the videos and then you come in and you do the kind of collections management tasks. As with all events, we use online where we think it's really appropriate. So we're speaking to an international cohort of people today, and online class is the way to do that, an online discussion. We have fantastic collaborators from all over the world. So if we think that we really need to get this person to speak to you, we will do that class on Zoom. If we think that the best way to learn this is to be in the stores or be in archives and special collections with the object, that is how we will deliver it. So it's a little bit of those, I can't tell you, it's determined by the learning outcomes question, but we do get you on campus every week. You'll be on campus, but there are online elements of that. There's really good stuff come out of the pandemic in terms of providing more flexibility, providing more online resources that you can kind of engage with at a slightly slower pace at your own time and a bit more self-directed. But we very much have you on campus when we think that that's the most appropriate way to deliver that learning outcome. Right, I think we might have got through all the questions. It is bang on 5 o'clock, and I'm so grateful for all of you for listening. Well done if you've made it to the end. I'm very grateful to our student reps. I'm just delighted to hear about everything that they've done this year. And this is why David and I do our jobs. We have these wonderful individuals who are going to go off and change the sector. And that's what we're so excited about. So hopefully, if you're watching at home, that's going to be you this time next year. Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you in September. Please get in touch if you've got any more questions.